Users, we have a brand new free embroidery course that's 2 hours long that I want to invite you to attend. Hi, I'm Sarah from sewingmastery.com, and we're the ones that have many videos on YouTube where you can master your sewing machines, embroidery machines, and sergers. We also have a whole host of online courses. We have taken one of our most popular online course, the Embroidery Essentials online course, and turned it into a 2-hour mini course where you can enroll for free and see what taking an online course is all about. The Embroidery Essentials course quilts are designed to help you become a master of your embroidery machine. Through a series of repetition, we take you through over 15 different embroidery techniques to help you master every corner, function, feature, and I give lots of tips along the way. We have helped over 3,000 students around the world master their embroidery machines with our course. What we want you to do is take the next 30 days after enrollment and work through the first 2 lessons. Plus, we've left in plenty of bonus content to help you get started, know how to download designs from the internet. So if you've never done that before, we have step-by-step instructions to help you whether you're a PC, Windows user, or a Mac computer. And then you're going to start with the most simplest lessons. You're going to find out how much you can learn by inviting me to your sewing room and going through this step-by-step. Now, you can watch the videos and learn a ton, but I do recommend doing these first 2 lessons hands-on. It's amazing the difference of learning that you will experience by actually doing the steps and lessons and the blocks we're going to do, not just watching them. Trust me, once you get started, you will know what I'm talking about by being hungry for more information. After you do these first couple lessons, we will then invite you to enroll in the full version of the Embroidery Essentials online course, where you're going to watch me do this entire quilt and all the blocks and techniques. We're talking about trapunto, applique, cut work, quilting design, shadow work, lace designs, zippered bags, you name it. This is your place to be. We have helped so many people become masters of their embroidery machine. So if your embroidery machine is still packed up in the box it came in, this is where I want you to start. It is as simple as getting it out and following through the first couple videos that we have in this mini course. Once you enroll, you have 30 days to complete the video series. After that, we hope you'll enroll in the full version of the Embroidery Essentials online course, where all the videos are specific for the Bernina embroidery machines. Now, it doesn't matter which embroidery model you have. Trust me, the step-by-steps are very similar from some of the simplest Bernina embroidery machines to the most advanced. So wherever you are on your embroidery journey, if you know you're not using it to its fullest, I invite you to join us for this quick little free Bernina Embroidery Essentials mini course, which you can click on this link and enroll today. I can't wait to see what you're able to master in just doing these short few lessons that we have provided for you. If you do have questions, join us over at our Embroidery Essentials Facebook group or reach out to me at info@sewingmastery.com. We're happy to help, and we can't wait to get you using the embroidery module that you already own to its fullest. I hope to see you in class soon. So you might be wondering what type of supplies you need for the Bernina embroidery. So you might be wondering what type of supplies you need for the Bernina Embroidery Essentials mini course that you're about ready to start. Now, first, we have gone in and left our full version of supply list that we describe fabrics and stabilizers, threads, and how to all get started from our full Embroidery Essentials course. What you're going to be needing is just a couple pieces of batting, cotton batting, and a couple maybe fat quarters or small pieces of fabric. We have you start by cutting them into 7-inch squares. So you will see as you watch this next video how we get prepped for the course, but you are going to see me talking about what you're going to need for the full course. Just note, you need a couple pieces of fabric, some no-show mesh, which we're going to explain what type of stabilizer that is. Plus, we are going to show you the best way to conserve stabilizer when you approach embroidery projects that have a lot of blocks or repetition to them. You don't need much for threads, and you could probably use just any color of thread and fabric that you have close by. So I can't wait for you to get started and see what an online course is all about and whether you can master your embroidery machine just by watching our videos. I guarantee that you're going to become more confident with your embroidery machine by watching this mini course. Welcome to the Embroidery Essentials online course. I'm Sarah, your teacher for this entire course. I'm going to take you through step by step of every part of your embroidery machine. We have recently added videos specific to be used with Bernina embroidery machines, and you're going to watch me create this entire quilt from start to finish. We're going to do 15 different embroidery techniques, all while helping you learn all the parts and areas of your embroidery machine. And you know what actually makes this course work is the repetition of you doing every one of these blocks over and over and over again. You can't just watch the videos and wonder why you and your embroidery machine aren't getting along. You have to actually do the lessons. They're small, they're quick, and I am going to show you lots of tricks along the way to help you become a master of your embroidery machine. And this is going to help you too be able to pick up any embroidery collection going forward and know exactly what to do. What to do if something goes wrong with your machine, or if you kind of get a creative bug, how you can go about changing things up just a little bit. So a couple things as we get started. Number one, there are 2 sets of handouts and your embroidery designs to download. So we're going to have videos to help you with specifically downloading designs and putting them on a USB stick. Those 2 handouts, one of them is the original Anita Good Design class curriculum. And with that, it's almost like 70 pages long. There's one PDF where you can download or even just view on your computer that entire file. If you have trouble downloading that, we have broken it up into 4 parts where each part will be a smaller section of that large original document. I also have my own teacher's notes that I want you to also print off, because there'll be some information on how to pick out fabrics and a couple corrections that I need you to do as we go through the course. And I'll reference which ones, when we get to those, are in which lesson. So thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to get started. You can reach out to me at any time at our email address, info@embroidery-essentials.com, or post your question on the Embroidery Essentials online course Facebook group, where a lot of graduating students can help answer your question day or night. So let's get started. Did you get a free Bernina embroidery
Сшивание при последней покупке квилтинговой машины Бёрнина? Привет, я Сара из sewingmastery.com, где мы делаем бесплатные видеоуроки по многим моделям, которые одновременно шьют и вышивают. Но если эта коробка стоит у тебя дома, и ты боишься ее открывать, я хочу пригласить тебя на наш онлайн-курс Bёрнина Embroidery Essentials. Мы только что пересняли весь этот курс на вышивальную машину Бёрнина, чтобы помочь тебе освоить каждую часть процесса вышивания. Значит, ты будешь смотреть, как я шью именно это одеяло на протяжении всего курса. Ниже приведены ссылки, по которым ты даже можешь бесплатно посмотреть несколько из этих видео, в том числе некоторые из этих основ. Например, как перенести дизайн со своего компьютера на машину. И я знаю, что это, наверное, страшная тема, особенно если ты не очень разбираешься в компьютерах. Но не бойся, мы здесь, чтобы помочь. Так что если ты знаешь, что не используешь свою вышивальную машинку в полной мере или вообще не пользуешься ею, потому что она все еще в коробке, ты должна пройти этот курс. Мы помогли более чем 1,5 людям освоить свою вышивальную машину с помощью наших пошаговых уроков, которые помогут тебе понять, что вышивать — это так весело. И как только ты освоишь эти основы, ты поймешь, насколько большим потенциалом обладает твоя швейная и вышивальная машина Бёрнина, которую ты сможешь использовать в будущем. Так что не позволяй этому сидеть сложа руки и пропадать даром. Давай разберемся с этим вместе. Я помогу тебе освоить вышивку на твоей машинке Бёрнина. У нас также есть видео с 10 наиболее распространенными вопросами, которые люди задают об этом курсе перед тем, как записаться. Убедись, что ты полностью ознакомилась с этим и знаешь, чему ты собираешься научиться, и как замечательно ты и твоя машина будете ладить. Как только ты освоишь это произведение, оно, возможно, в некоторых твоих комнатах все еще будет в коробке. Так, давай же вытащим это наружу и повеселимся вместе. Я с нетерпением жду скорой встречи с тобой в классе.
Let's talk about what you need to know about downloading embroidery designs from the internet to your computer and then putting them on a USB stick. For this lesson, it really doesn't matter which brand of machine that you are using, but I am going to highlight a few things specific for certain brands, and also whether you're using a PC or a Mac computer. So first things to know is, yes, this part can be a little scary because you can't do the course without being able to transfer designs to your machine. So if you need any help along the way, just please reach out to me and I personally will walk you through the steps you need. But these next couple tips are going to be very, very helpful. But if you don't understand what some of this terminology is, just reach out at any time. Number one, embroidery designs downloaded from the internet are only for your embroidery machine to use. So your computer doesn't really know what type of file they are. They're actually a file that tells the embroidery arm how to move your hoop so it can create the stitch. It's a stitch file. So your computer, if you try to double click the design or file on your computer, it's gonna say, well, what program do you want to open this file up in? And it's going to be very confused. So number one, we don't double click the files on our computer. Number two, speaking of computers, you do need to have an actual computer, not just a phone or a tablet, to download designs onto, because those items don't have a USB port. So you do need to have access to a computer for this one part of this course. Now you can watch the videos and you can also look at the online handouts on any device. So sometimes having a tablet running your videos close by once you get started, that will work just fine. Next, let's talk about USB sticks. Size of USB sticks can make a difference on the brand of machine you're using. A lot of machines actually came with a USB stick, and that would be perfect to use. Some of them also can only use a 1 gig stick. Now, if you go to the store today and ask for a 1 gig stick, the people at like Best Buy are going to look at you funny because there's like, that's not a size of stick that's usually easy to find. Your sewing machine store you bought your machine from should be able to help you with this smaller stick. It's just the machines can't handle like a 64 gig stick because it's just too big. It's not prepared to take that much information in, hence the size. And those of you who had a USB stick that came with your machine, you'll notice it's one of those smaller sizes. Now, once your designs are downloaded from your course website, you're going to notice that they're going to come in zipped. That means that they're all in a pretty box. You need to open them up before moving them to the USB stick. They need to be extracted or unzipped on your computer, depending on if you're working with a PC or a Mac. Once they're extracted, all you need to do is copy them and paste them on the USB stick. And if that's something you've never done before, see if you can Google a helpful tip on how to actually move them from your computer to the USB stick. Once they're on the USB stick, they're ready to use, but they do have to be unzipped first. You also don't need any other embroidery software to transfer designs from the computer to the embroidery machine. That's a common question we get asked quite a bit. A lot of you have software, and that's wonderful, but we're going to be focusing on just the techniques and the fundamentals of working with your beautiful embroidery machine. Now, we do have a couple helpful videos in this course to help those of you using a Mac computer. So the whole transferring is going to be identical, but there's a funny looking file that gets put on your USB stick, and when you put it into your embroidery machine, it doesn't look like the designs are there. In our videos, we're going to show you where you just need to scroll down and get down past those kind of odd looking files until you get to the actual designs that you can use with your embroidery machine. So it's nothing wrong with your embroidery machine, and there's nothing wrong with your Mac computer. It's just they all see this extra file that does nothing for us. So you just need to learn how to bypass it and find the designs so you can get started. So as long as you don't double-click designs and try to open them on your computer, you use a small USB stick and you learn how to copy and paste, you should have the tools you need to get the designs from the computer to your embroidery machine. Now we're ready to go on to the next lesson. A very common question with a Bernina embroidery machine is, how do I get designs on my USB stick? So we have been talking about the Bernina USB stick that comes with the Bernina 880. So I have this plugged in my machine, and I want to show you just how easy it is to bring designs and copy them from your computer, a CD, someplace you've downloaded designs, and then have access to them on the machine. So number one, embroidery designs are not to be opened on your computer. Now, I know this is a Mac computer, but the concept is the same on a PC or Windows computer. So I have a folder of designs that I've downloaded, and in here are all the different full formats that come with this machine. So the key is, number one, you're only using either DST or EXP for the format that you're copying to the USB stick. This is my USB stick that I've plugged in. So sometimes if I have a very large grouping, I might start with a new folder. So we'll just go OESD. These are alphabets that I have been working with or will be working with. So I'm going to make up a little folder, and I'm going to open up that folder. And then as I look at where I've downloaded the designs, I find them in my downloads folder. And I'm only looking for which ones, EXP or DST. So here's the EXP. And you can actually highlight all of them. So click and drag, or even select all. You can do it that way too. But the idea is that, well, gosh, there's a lot in here. Wow, there's lots. How exciting. All right, so as soon as they're all selected, you have two options. You can come up here and hit copy. You can come to the edit folder or edit area, copy all 76 items, and then you're going to select where you want them to be pasted. So I'm selecting my USB stick in the folder that I've created and edit paste. So as soon as they paste in, they go really fast. Files for embroidery designs are teeny tiny. They don't take up much space at all on your USB stick. It's actually already done. So we can pull the USB stick out and plug it into the machine and you'll be ready to go. So I did mention just another thing, just don't double click these designs. These designs are to be opened only in your machine. Those are files that are to tell the embroidery hoop how to move your hoop to create those all those beautiful stitches. But unless you have purchased extra software, embroidery software that is, they will not open up in your computer. And people always try to open them. I'm like, but the computer doesn't know what they are. So that's because they're supposed to be over here at the machine. So just take the USB stick out, put it in your machine, and you're ready to embroider. Now we do have a video for those of you using a Mac computer, a little helpful tip for when you transfer designs over. You will get a few extra files and how easy it is to actually find them on the screen once you get over to your machine. Let's talk USB sticks for your Bernina 880. Now we have a couple videos that we're going to be covering with the information like which formats and if you're using a Mac computer versus a PC computer, just a couple of those things that you need to know. So one thing that you do have, and it came with your Bernina 880, is a Bernina USB stick. Now up to right now, I only thought it was a USB stick, which is great, except I was like, what's on this end? And this was very exciting for me because I didn't realize it was on the new Bernina sticks, this is a USB-C. So actually this plugs directly into my Mac computer because I actually don't have a USB port, which is no problem. I just use some type of like little pigtail, but this side here is the same size as this. So if for those of you using some of the newest equipment, this was actually a nice surprise. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. We're going to just put that cap on it and be able to use it from your computer to the machine. Now, this is a 16 gig USB stick that comes with this machine, and it's ready to use with the Bernina, so it's going to work just fine. Now, if you are buying other USB sticks, do keep in mind you probably do want to buy them in the smaller size. Like this one here is a 1 gig stick. Now you think, oh my gosh, is it not going to hold enough? Keep in mind, embroidery designs are actually very, very tiny files. And so loading an entire like collection from a CD or from a collection you download from the internet is not going to even start to fill these up. So just keep that in mind. You can put a ton of designs on here, but you might not always want to keep all the designs. I mean, there's a point where you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling trying to find what you're looking for, where I use this a little bit more as a transportation mode. So I use it, and then when I'm really done with the designs, I'll go ahead and clear them off the stick. Now I actually have two in my hand because you actually realize you have two ports over here on the side. So I'm going to put them in just a second, but when we take a look at our screen, you're used to this welcome screen when you have the embroidery module on. And when you notice at the top, there's a USB symbol. So right now, since I don't have any sticks plugged in, nothing is showing. But when I do plug them in, I'm going to touch that and then they will show up. So I'm going to just put the Bernina one in the top location and then touch the USB symbol. I see what's on that particular stick there. And then when I put the other one in, I get a different screen. I pretty much get a stick 1 and stick 2. So stick 1 is the first one, And then as I go back, stick 2 is the second one. So again, if you were needing to pull designs off of one and a second one, you can put them both in at the same time. So very nice and convenient at that point. So let's talk formats for just a second. You will need to be putting on the format of EXP or DST. That's what this machine will recognize. So that is the formats you need to be using. If you're using ART, that's not what we're looking for. It's not what's going to work with this machine. Next, one last thing. So I do use a Mac computer. So a quick little note, we'll do a separate video too on this, but Mac users do keep in mind, and you're going to notice it when I go into my sticks here, is that you are going to get a weird looking file when you look in the folder of the designs you just downloaded. So I get a lot of questions like, what are these little pink squiggly lines that you see on the screen? So there's just a little extra, there's nothing wrong with your machine, there's nothing wrong with your USB stick or your computer. Just Mac computers do one extra little file that the Bernina can actually see. So I have a little trick for you. If you are using a Windows PC computer, please ignore all of this information. All you need to know is that when you are looking at your USB stick, they'll come right up and then you can select the designs you're ready to embroider. Okay, for those of you who are seeing these, you're going to notice twice as many designs on this USB stick. I have page 1 of 16 here. So here's what I'm going to do. I need to actually scroll to page 8 because at 8 or 9, let's see here, how's the numbers work? Here we go. Right at 8, I start to see my designs. And these are the ones that actually are embroidery designs. The lines are not. So when I touch it, this will bring it right in. This is a whole group of monograms and fun borders that I have plans for and hope to get to embroidering them in the future. So if I wanted to add a second one from that USB stick, I can add the plus and there's a second one. And then I could change the hoop size so I could have some fun with maybe positioning the designs in a location that would be presentable. There we go. How fun would that be? All right, so just know that designs from your USB sticks can be brought in just like accessing the designs that are built in to the Bernina 880. The Bernina 880 comes with a 16 gig USB stick. Now, this is a newer version of this stick, and I was very nicely surprised when I opened it. I did not know this until today, is that yes, it is a USB stick on one end, but then I noticed that the other end had something else. And for those of you with newer computers, this is a USB-C connector or Thunderbolt 3 connector. So if you have that as an option on your computer, which actually I do, I was able to use that and I was very excited because I didn't have to have like a little adapter for my particular computer. So we do have a few videos to help you understand if you're using a PC or a Mac computer. You do have the ability to take more than one USB stick and put it into the side of the machine. So you can pull one design off this one and one design off this one and combine them. You could even save designs to the USB stick. So if you've created something on screen and you are saving it, this is one of your choices. So you can actually go from USB to machine and you can go from machine to USB. So as soon as you put it in the machine, you'll be able to access the USB symbol right here, and whatever is on the stick will show up. Just a little note, formats. You will be needing to use only the formats of DST or EXP, and those are the ones that your machine will recognize. Now let me put this in the machine and let me show you one more thing. So I can go ahead and touch the USB symbol. Here is a folder of some upcoming designs that I will be using, but my particular computer of choice right now is a Mac computer. Now if you have a PC, you will not run into this, but if you have a Mac computer, and a lot of people are getting more and more of these, you're going to see some extra little squiggly lines that are pink. These are not embroidery designs, and there's nothing wrong with your machine, your stick, or your computer, or the designs. But the Bernina 880 can actually recognize some extra files that the Mac puts on the stick when you copy designs over. So here's what you need to do. There's pages 1 through 16. The first half of them, for me, are not embroidery designs, and as soon as I scroll to the midway point, then the designs will show up. This is a whole collection of some alphabets, some borders, some sayings, and I have a fun project that I'm looking forward to getting to shortly. So this is, if I touch it, then it's going to bring it right in like a normal design. But just keep in mind that if you do see those squiggly designs, you will find yourself just needing to scroll forward until you get to the ones that are the actual designs. At times, I struggle to put the Bernina Jumbo Bobbin hook back in. If you are like me, when you take this out for cleaning and oiling, which we always recommend to do it before you sew each day, it really makes a difference. This is sometimes a little cumbersome, especially if you're sitting at the machine or the machine's in a cabinet. So I have a fabulous tip for you, and I heard this other day and I had to try it for myself. It seemed too easy to be true. So on the hook system, there is the little circle that they always tell me, well, that needs to line up with the circle that's below the center point right here. So it is kind of odd at an odd angle. This is not directly up above. But if you set this with the hole lined up right into this kind of holder, the race cover, you can set it here, and it's magnetic. So if you have it lined up just right, it'll go right in and hook into place. See how that has locked in? Let me show you that again. Line up the hole, place it right down here, and then you do have to find how quick or slow you have to do it. Look, it's in. Close that up, put your bobbin case back in, and you'll be back to sewing in no time flat. Today for you, I have the top 10 Bernina embroidery questions. We're going to go through the questions I always get asked in my classes and online and all of our social media. Hi, I'm Sarah from sewingmastery.com, where we do videos on all different kinds of machines, embroidery machines, sewing machines, sergers in the Bernina, Husqvarna Viking, Pfaff, and Singer brands. So check out our website. We've got over 4,000 videos that you can see. So we get these questions all the time. So with the popularity of our top 10 Bernina sewing machine question list that we just did, and we'll link to that below in the description so you can check out that video as well, I decided to go ahead and list out what our top 10 embroidery questions are and kind of go through them. Now, if you're not a Bernina user, you're going to find that a good amount of these questions will be answers that you'll be able to use on your embroidery machine. So I've been working through a project. I'm actually doing a whole bunch of placemats that I'm embroidering on, and I'm thinking through all the steps that I've needed to do and know about my machine, my fabric, my stabilizer, my needles, that led up to me being able to sit down and embroider those out. So that project is coming. I can't wait to show you all the steps that we have for embroidering on things that are hard to hoop. So by taking time to go through these questions will really help you no matter what level of embroiderer you are. So if you're a new Bernina embroiderer or you've been using your machine for many years, I hope you'll get some good ideas of whether you're doing things correctly or maybe you can up your game and do things a little better. Okay, so Bernina people, this is the first one's your exact question you always ask. Which embroidery format is right for my Bernina machine? I always see that ART, which is a Bernina format, is what people think that they need for their machine. But tell you the truth, the format you need to download to your USB stick is either EXP or DST. So those formats are available from every embroidery company. That's like the standard generic. It's the stitch information you need for your embroidery machine to move that hoop and stitch that design. So either one of those formats works for you, and those will be the ones you want to download. So with that out of the way, I do want to note that one of our later questions is for those of you working with a Mac computer and transferring designs to that USB stick. So make sure you watch to the end because we got great tips along the way. The second most commonly asked question is, what do I do when I see my bobbin thread coming to the top of my fabric? So what are you actually seeing? So first off, when you go to your embroidery part of your machine, your tension with the computerized machines automatically drops to a lower number. So, but you are usually using a lighter weight thread in your bobbin and a little heavier thread in your needle. So the goal is that your bobbin thread pulls the top thread to the back side, and you should see some of that top color on the back of your hoop or back of your fabric. So if you are not seeing that and you are seeing some of that bobbin thread coming up top, just stop your machine. All you need to do is take and reduce, smaller number, reduce your top tension down a bit. So usually, like if it's at 2.5 right now, start by moving it to 2. If it helps, but you still see a little of that bobbin thread, don't be afraid to bring it down to say 1 3/4 or down to 1.5. Once you see that bobbin thread disappear, it doesn't matter what that number actually is. The key is that you're balancing that the bobbin is now tighter than the top, and will pull those stitches to the back and make it look nice and smooth and round on the top. So why does that happen in the first place? So over time, as your embroidery machine moves and vibrates, things loosen up. And as they loosen up, that's when you have to kind of start to adjust for it. So if you're finding you're always having to lower your top tension, it's probably just time to go ahead and have your machine serviced, and your service technician will get everything kind of tightened back up and back to its right place to start, and then you can start embroidering. But over time, like I said, things will loosen up and you might need to adjust that bobbin thread. Now, if you really can't get things totally set, I have been known to match my bobbin thread to my top thread, and then it's not as noticeable. Next question, why is my embroidery not completely lined up? So like you're embroidering and then now it's embroidering like a 1/2 inch away or 1 inch away. One of two things happens. The most important thing first is to always have your embroidery machine. It's a computer plugged into a battery backup. Now this is not just a surge protector, and it sure beats plugging it into the wall outlet. You really can't get nice consistent power that's needed for this machine to stay constantly running at its optimum level. If the machine sees any dip or spike of electricity, it's going to shift your design, and it will, well, then it won't work. It just doesn't look good at the end. You're finding the details, the eyes, the ears are kind of offset, and you're going to have to start over. It is no fun. If you're embroidering in the warmer months of your area, you will find that having that battery backup will save you frustration, power issues, especially as your air conditioner kicks on and off in your home. Plugging into a battery backup will also help with your circuit boards. They'll just keep them safe and humming along for a lifetime. I've often had people ask me, why doesn't my embroidery machine start? They're pushing the start button and nothing is going. Or you're getting some messages like put on the hoop, and you're like, I have put on the hoop. So here's the thing with a Bernina embroidery machine. It's designed to have you do things in a specific order. If you kind of jump the gun, put the hoop on before it is expecting it, it's going to want you to take it off so it can calibrate, and then it will tell you exactly when to put the hoop on. So don't get frustrated. You just need to start to do things in the order that it needs to be done in. The other thing is if you have not selected your Bernina foot, number 26, the embroidery foot, your machine will not stitch yet. So make sure you have selected the machine's foot, especially if the last thing you were doing was regular sewing. That foot's still selected. You got to tell the machine that you have switched over to that foot. Speaking of switching over, make sure that if you are using a straight stitch throat plate or you have one, put it on, you're just going to get a nice, better result with your embroidery. And don't forget, you're going to need a fresh embroidery needle. It just saves you so much frustration by starting with a new needle. So before I go on, you do see this cute little quilt. This is our Embroidery Essentials online course. This is a course that I teach that really helps you master your machine. So like what we were just talking about, like learning the order you do things with this particular project, it's not about the project, it's about the repetition of doing all the steps and all the blocks and 3 additional projects that you find yourself becoming in tune with the machine. It will take you from 0 to hero of using your machine. So if you two have not become best friends, maybe you're still a little scared of your Bernina embroidery machine, this course could be your answer. Again, we'll put links below this YouTube video where you can check it out and see if it's right for you. Join us and over 1,000 other students that we have in this course that have mastered their machine. Plus, you have access to me and I can answer all your embroidery questions at any time that they come up. This course is actually over 5.5 hours long and you get to keep it for life. So at any time you can come back, refresh, relearn, and if you get a new embroidery machine, take it again and learn all those great functions that are on the new machine. So this next question is about centering a design. Now that sounds pretty simple, but it's a very common question with the Bernina machines. So doing something like this, an Embroidery Essentials online course, will help you actually do that centering 16 times so you know exactly where it's going to stitch. So it's pretty key that you start where you think you're going to start, and the design is exactly where you want it to be. So there is a video, we'll put links below, of how to find the center of your embroidery hoop, and if a design needs to start at a certain location on your fabric, how to get your needle to move to that exact spot. So this next question is about a thread stand. So people ask, do I really need a thread stand? So this is one that would just sit beside your embroidery machine. But on this particular model of Bernina, there is a thread stand actually built in to the side. So that says that it's pretty important to use a thread stand. And here's why. Number one, when you put your spool of thread on here, you don't have to actually put a spool cap on. So that's going to save you a lot of time. Next, as the thread has time to relax, as it goes up to the guide and then it travels over to the first part of your machine, it has time to relax. This can help for metallic threads, or if you're sewing with clear threads, that will help that. And you notice how fast your embroidery machine is running? You will notice that the thread, as it's whipping off that spool and coming up here, it has time to kind of like unkink a little bit. So I am a fan of thread stands. It can save you a lot of headaches. So if you ever have threads that are kind of getting caught at the spool or on your spool caps, switch to a thread stand. It is totally worth it. I'm a fan of hoop springs. So on the Bernina hoops that come with your machine, you're going to notice that when you go to hoop fabric and stabilizer together, it's almost like you need a third hand. You need a little spring that helps hold open the bracket and allows you to easily get your fabric in. This is a hoop spring that I highly recommend. There's like 5 in a pack, so you can put them in all the hoops that come with your machine. And again, we'll put links below where you can find more information and the blog post and video I wrote about putting in a hoop spring and how it's going to also save you a lot of time. Needles. Needles are something everybody always asks about. Do I need an embroidery needle? Well, that's what it was made for. So an embroidery needle is sharper and will definitely be the right needle. Also has a little taller eye in there. So as that thread's going through for thousands and thousands of stitches, there's room for it. As you're working on things like some thicker fabrics, or you're in the hoop projects that have multiple layers, you're gonna notice that that is something that is so key for really getting a quality stitch, is having a bigger needle for thicker fabrics and a slightly smaller needle for the thinner fabrics. I'm a fan of a size 90-14 embroidery needle. I have 2 more questions that are always asked of me, plus I have a comment I hear a lot of times in my class. So first off, for those of you who are working with a Mac computer and your Bernina machine, I've got a little something for you. If you're a PC or a Windows person, just ignore this particular part. So a lot of people are using Mac computers. I use them myself. And when you put a design from a Mac computer to a USB stick, you're going to notice that there's some extra lines that come up when you open it on the screen. And it's nothing wrong with your machine, and there's nothing wrong with your computer or your USB stick. Just happens that this machine can recognize an extra file that the Mac computer puts on that USB stick. So here's how it's going to go. If you have 10 files that you have put on that stick to embroider, the first 10 are going to come up and look not like an embroidery design. You need to get and scroll through till you get to the 11th design, and then those will be your embroidery designs. 11 through 20 will be the ones you're looking for. So just know that they're always the second half of those files, and the first half you just ignore and just go ahead and scroll down until you start to see your embroidery designs on your USB stick. Now this last question is something that I actually get a little excited about because people do ask about sizing designs in the machine. So Bernina is one of the only brands that allows you that when you bring a design in, and if you want it to be a 400% bigger, if it still fits in your hoop, you can go ahead and enlarge it 400%, and it will add the stitches in it. Again, why am I so excited? Because most brands of embroidery machines only let you actually go up 20% larger or 20% smaller, and they don't actually add or subtract stitches. That's why they limit you at 20%. On a Bernina, if you're looking at the stitches, if it's got 1,000 stitches, you can go up to 4,000 stitches, 8,000 stitches. And you'll also notice that it will take that much longer for the design to stitch. So you know that it's adding the stitches in, and vice versa. It will reduce stitches if you're making that design smaller. It will take less time to stitch because there's less stitches. That is something that they have built into embroidery machines from day one. And it's something that I love to show my students because they don't have to have extra software to make it fit. So if they just need it a little longer, a little taller, you can just go ahead and size it up or size it lengthwise or taller or proportioned, and you will have the stitch count come out absolutely perfect. So those are the 10 most common questions that we get, but this last little one I wanted to add in because it's a comment I hear a lot. Number one, if I'm at a class and I notice somebody reaching down and trying to thread the needle manually, I'm like, why aren't you using your needle threader? And I get this more often than I think I should, is people like, oh, well, I just never figured it out, or it just doesn't work anymore, or they just don't know how it works. So they're just there rethreading that needle every time a color change comes up. And that gets old. Even for me, I can still see that eye of the needle, but eventually that just takes a lot of time. My advice to you is actually figure out how that needle threader works. If it's not working, have your local service person put a new needle threader on or adjust it so it does work, and then have them show you how it is supposed to work. We have videos on how a needle threader is supposed to work, so check those out and just take the time to do it so you're not struggling rethreading that machine and having to thread that needle every single time. On a side note, you can find a handheld needle threader that you could add to your accessory box, and that would at least help you if you're at a point where you just can't get your machine in to be serviced. It will allow you to easily push that thread through the whole of that eye without you having to squint and push it through yourself. So if any of these tips have been helpful for you, please give us a thumbs up on this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and put in the comments which tip was the most helpful for you. And check out our Embroidery Essentials online course, and I hope, maybe, I'll see you in class soon. If hooping fabric on your Bernina is a hassle, I have a $5 fix that will save you tons of frustration, and it's easy as putting a spring inside your Bernina hoops. This will work on your Bernina small hoop, medium hoop, oval hoop, and mega hoop. Every time I've shown my Bernina students this quick $5 fix, they're amazed how easy it is to hoop their embroidery projects. So if you've ever tried hooping your fabric and found that you needed 3 hands, or you've just about given up on embroidery, hi, I'm Sarah from SewingMastery.com, and we're in the middle of filming the Bernina 790 videos. I'm also the instructor for the Embroidery Essentials online course and the Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course. So if you're looking to master your Bernina, check out the links below. Now back to this hooping issue. So these hoops have this little opening that spring back closed while you're trying to hoop it. And again, I struggle with this myself until I put the springs in. Again, links are below this YouTube video where you can purchase this $5 fix and get enough springs to put in all the hoops that you own. If you've bought any optional Bernina hoops lately, you know that this is a much easier to use system. A quick release and a quick tighten tightens the entire hoop around the fabric, making it perfect every single time. But sometimes these hoops are too big and I'm doing smaller projects. I need to be using the smaller hoops that came with my Bernina embroidery machine. Once you put these hoop springs in, I guarantee hooping will never be easier. Let me show you how. Start by taking one spring out of your package and knowing that it is going to sit in between these 2 gray pieces. Now, there is a nut at the end of this, so as you take this whole assembly apart, make sure that that little nut doesn't get away from you. This is what I'm talking about. If you go ahead and turn your hoop over, you don't even really need this inner hoop in. So if you just go ahead and set it aside, that will work just fine. Take the screw, slide it in the shorter side, and add the spring to the screw. Once the spring is in place it into the other side of the hoop, and then go ahead and set the nut back in this little channel. Once you get the nut reattached to the front part of the screw, you can see how the spring is already doing its job. It's holding this hoop open, that when I go and place my fabric in with these hoops, see how it holds that open? And until I get everything re-hooped, this is kind of keeping that spread apart so I don't have to find my third hand to try to do that part. So then you're just going to go ahead, put your fabric and stabilizer in place, and know that this will be exactly where it needs to be until you're ready to tighten up the entire screw mechanism. Just plan to leave that spring in there. Once it's in, I never take it out. So if you want a simple fix, click the links below this YouTube video to find out all the information, plus links to our online courses to help you master your Bernina sewing machine and Bernina embroidery machine. I hope to see you in class soon. Have you ever wondered why a needle actually breaks? Hi, I'm Sarah from SewingMastery.com, and I was doing some sewing today and thinking about some questions that were recently asked via email to me of needle questions and breakage and why is my needle breaking. So I am in the middle of filming a new online course, so I stopped. This is a new Bernina Embroidery Essentials course to help you master your embroidery machine. Plus we have other courses to help you master decorative stitches and all those wonderful machine accessories that you might have bought but haven't actually got them out to use. Now, a lot of our courses, we use a lot of different kinds of needles. And needles are something that once you really get a grasp of why they're made for certain techniques, it's a lot easier to have a whole collection of needles and know which one for which project. But eventually, something happens and you need to change the needle and you kind of go, well, why did it break? Or why am I needing to change to a different kind of needle? So I actually have 15 different reasons needles can break. So number 1, when you have a spool of thread that has this little indent for you to store your thread, when it's on a sewing machine, sometimes the thread can actually get caught in kind of the thread holder. Well, if it gets caught and you are sewing, the thread gets super tight and it will bend the needle, and then it will usually then hit your throat plate, and that's number one, a broken needle. But then you think, well, why did it happen? And you're looking around your bobbin area and your needle and such, and then you realize the problem is way up here. Speaking of other things about your thread spool, a lot of us have horizontal spool pins that we place our spools on. And with that, we are advised to put a spool cap on. Well, if the cap is not close enough to the spool and there's a little gap, sometimes the thread will drop in there and also get tight and come out with the same result as the first issue. So spool caps can be a culprit. So as you can see, I'm in the middle of sewing blocks together, and I actually prefer to use a thread stand. It's currently just sitting kind of behind my machine, and then with that I don't have to worry about any thread getting hooked around the spool cap or part of the spool itself. Speaking of how your machine is threaded, if the thread gets hooked around a guide more than once, maybe it wraps it around or it gets caught on a guide extra, that extra drag can also put that strain on the needle. And once again, it will break, and then you rethread the machine, hopefully undoing the thread where that guide might have been kind of wrapped around a few times. That will make a big difference. Now, when people start working on larger projects, this is my next thing I see when needles break, is when fabric projects are heavy, we tend to feel the need to push them through our machine, help them go through. And you know what the easiest way to help with that problem is to lengthen your stitch length. Let the machine's teeth actually help you pull or get the fabric through the machine. So what actually happens is if you're pushing and helping that fabric, you're gonna eventually tend to bend that needle just enough towards the back of the opening in the throat plate, and it will hit. Once it hits, that usually breaks your needle as well. So take a look at the throat plate on your machine. If you are noticing little tick marks or penetrations and indents that weren't there when you first bought it, that's because needles have broken and hit that. Now that can lead to other issues with your sewing machine, because as you sew, thread can get caught on those rough spots. Now often your sewing machine technician can buff those out at your next service. Now if it has become too jaggedy and rough, it might be time for a new throat plate. Now I'll just throw this up here because Pfaff and Viking users, your throat plate has a little notch on the back left corner. That is there for part of the cutting system, and that was not you breaking your needle on your throat plate at all. A common question in our Sewing Mastery classes of, oh my goodness, I've already ruined my throat plate. But you haven't. Next, when the needle is too small for the thickness of fabric, here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So let's say you have all your pieces cut out for a fun new tote bag. You sew these two pieces together, this little pocket assembly is together, but as you progress through the project, you're gonna notice that layers that are 2 layers turn into 4 layers, and 4 layers turn into 8 layers, and you have interfacing and handles and other thicknesses. So by the time you get towards the end of that project, you are probably needing a much larger needle, sharper needle, and one that can handle those thicker layers. So eventually, if you hit those full 8+ layers with a traditional size needle, like a size 80, it will give out just because it's just not strong enough. So then replace it with a larger needle, such as a denim needle, a top stitch needle, or a Microtex needle. Another culprit for needles breaking is when the needle is not inserted as high as it needs to go for the machine to work correctly. So you're putting in a new needle and you get it up and then you tighten the screw, not realizing that it should have gone a little bit higher. So now that point is lower than it should. When that needle goes down into your bobbin area, it's going to hit something. And that will also lead to probably a broken needle, little frustration. And here's the way you can help make sure you always get your needle to the highest positions. Two things. Number one, you can use a needle inserter that will help make sure you're lifting the needle as high as possible before tightening that screw. Also, by using your needle threader to check to see if that needle is at the proper height, if the needle threader does not line up with your needle hole, that is clue number one that it is not as high as it should be. Speaking of tightening needle screws, if you don't get it tight enough, you will find that after a little sewing and a little vibration, that needle will just fall out. And at the wrong time, that needle could hit something and just again, break in two. And that's no fun. But I do caution you because there is a fine line between a needle tightened just right and a needle that is over tightened with that screw. You could actually damage the screw if you go too much. So you do have to find that happy medium where you need to tighten it so it doesn't fall out, but not over tighten it so the screw can continue to hold the needle in. Let's talk about things that happen down below the throat plate. The hook that creates the stitch and the bobbin case that holds your bobbin. So a couple things. When you're working with heavy fabrics, if you get any jarring, again, the needle can kind of move and it can actually hit the hook or the bobbin case, leaving little needle strikes. And with that, that usually will, if it doesn't break the needle, it will definitely put a dent into the point, making it kind of sound a little popping when you go to sew next time. But you will find that if it breaks, that you want to go down there and see if there's any rough spots. If there is any rough spots on your hook or on the bobbin case itself, make sure your local service technician can also buff those out because rough spots can lead to thread catching while the stitch is being formed down and connecting with the bobbin case. So you will find that once a needle breaks, there's sometimes more things that happen because it kind of starts a chain reaction that can affect the way your machine works. So if you are having any machine issues, let's see if there has been some needle strikes or gouges that have affected some of those moving parts down below. Sometimes when we sew over something that's really thick, the needle will bend but not break. So once you have a bent needle, you are probably playing a little chicken with your sewing machine of whether that stitch is going to form, whether your thread maybe starts breaking, or maybe the needle starts hitting other things, and that can lead to other frustrating parts of sewing. So if you don't know if the needle is bent, it's not obvious, go ahead and put a new needle in and see if that solves the problem. Some needles, when you pull them out of the package, are just bad to start with. I mean, think about the manufacturing that has to go into making a needle. I heard once that it takes like almost 50 different passes for a needle to actually be honed into the shape that it needs. From the tip to the groove in the middle, the hole, and then the top part that's a whole different shape with the flat side on the back. Now, don't quote me on what it takes to make a needle. I really don't have a clue, but I can think about the amount of places that something has to carve that little piece of metal into a sharp point. And there'll be a time where probably something isn't just absolutely perfect. So opening a new pack of needles does not guarantee that every single needle you ever put your hands on is perfect and ready to use. So if you have problems, change out that needle one more time and give it another try. Now, sewing over pins or even sewing over a zipper can be a culprit and needles can break. So pins, I am always a fan of sewing up to a pin, but pulling them out before I stitch over it. Most of the time, you're going to be able to just kind of jump the log or jump over the pin. But there's plenty of times where you think you're going to miss it and then you hear the little tick. And now the tip is not as sharp. You are going to find that there is a time where you can hit a straight pin so square that the pin will break, the needle will break, and it just sounds awful. So make sure that you take the time, sew up to your pins, pull them out before going over them. Speaking of zippers, same thing. Hand turn your needle through those zipper teeth as you're crossing over and creating that construction seam for where that zipper either begins or ends. Now this next one applies to exactly what I've been sewing today. I actually have a straight stitch throat plate on my machine, meaning if I sew zigzag, my needle will hit the throat plate. Now, a lot of machines these days are super smart and will have an option for you to tell it, hey, keep my needle in the center needle position. Don't let me pick a stitch that would go off to the side and break my needle. Now, even though you have that option, I do find students don't always engage it. So you're sewing straight, 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 and then tomorrow I come back in, turn the machine on, and need to do a zigzag. If I hadn't told the machine that I have a straight stitch throat plate on, I get to put a new needle in immediately. On a similar note, a great tip for those of you using a 1/4 inch foot, and if you've looked at your 1/4 inch foot, it is traditionally a center needle position foot, meaning, once again, if you pick a zigzag, it's gonna hit the metal part of the foot. A little trick is to activate that throat plate option for center needle position on your machine. And you can just pretend that you have a straight stitch throat plate on and let your machine make sure that you don't pick the wrong stitch with the foot that won't let you stitch from side to side. And after a while, needles just get weak. The more you use it, the weaker it can get. And eventually it just gives up the ghost and just breaks. And so with that, there's really no time, rhyme, or reason of why a needle breaks in the middle of the project. It could just be its time. The nice thing about needles is the cheapest thing that you change for your sewing machine to continue to run smoothly. So don't skimp out on needles. Know immediately when you are frustrated, the first thing you should do is change your needle and double check that you have the right type of needles. We have a whole series of needle videos, they're super short, that we'll link to right up here, where you can check out all the different types of needles as I explain what their uses are and how they will benefit for different types of fabrics and projects. So if any of these tips have been helpful for you, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you would like to invite me to join you in your sewing studio for some online courses, check out the links below. I look forward to joining you in your sewing studio with one of our online courses to help you master your sewing machine, embroidery machine, or serger. Welcome to the Bernina Embroidery Essentials online course. I'm Sarah, and I am going to be your instructor for this entire course, and I'm so excited to be invited to your sewing room. So a little background for me. I have always worked with Bernina sewing machines and, of course, embroidery machines, as I worked for Bernina as an educator many, many years ago. And I have my own retail store in South Dakota, and we do all the videos on sewingmastery.com. So if that's how you found this course, welcome. We're so excited you're here. But this time we are taking the Embroidery Essentials course, which we originally did for very generic embroiderers. So it didn't matter which embroidery machine that you have, but we have had so many Bernina people sign up. I've decided that I will do the entire course again, this time on a Bernina. So you'll be able to watch lessons from the original Embroidery Essentials course, where we do so on an embroidery machine, a Husqvarna Viking Epic embroidery machine. And again, a hoop is a hoop, a needle is a needle, and an embroidery design is an embroidery design. So it really doesn't matter which of the lessons you watch, but I'm actually excited to once again stitch out the entire Embroidery Essentials course because it's something that I have actually enjoyed since I first started teaching it. It has helped so many people become a master of their embroidery machine in this shortest amount of time. And you know why? It's not about what you're going to create. Yes, that is kind of fun, and you have an outcome to prove that you know your embroidery machine. But what it is the repetition of you doing the same thing over and over and over. So you'll be able to go back and rewatch lessons at any time. You can reach out to me with questions on your specific embroidery machine, make and model. And we have a Facebook group that you can join and see what other students are doing and see a lot of questions and answers that have already been asked. But don't be afraid, ask your question. A lot of times those students will answer your question before I even get up in the morning. How wonderful is that? So wherever you're coming from around the world, I'm so excited you're here. So what we're going to do is walk you through the first parts of what you need to get set up. So we have all your instructions for you in another section for downloading. There's 2 downloads that you're going to want to either download and view on a computer or download and print off. Maybe if you're one to make more notes, that's not a bad idea to print them out. One of them is an almost 70-page PDF. It's a little large, so if you're having trouble downloading it, we've also divided it into 4 sections, and you can download kind of 1 of 4, 2 of 4, and so forth, and kind of get them in smaller chunks. I also have a specific student handout that I have made because we're going to do these lessons slightly out of order from the original curriculum. And the reason for it is so we start really simple and we progress through great secondary, third, fun techniques that sometimes incorporate things we've learned from the first couple lessons. So make sure you print off this one. This one's about 16 or so pages. This is my information for you. We also have your embroidery designs. Those 2 need to be downloaded and transferred to a USB stick. And I'll have some separate lessons for doing that specifically, especially if you have a PC or a Mac computer. So we'll help you every step of the way. And you know what? Downloading designs is sometimes the hardest part, I know. And if you can't get that part done, how do you even get going in your lessons? So make sure if that's a harder part for you to do, you've never done it before, you don't know how to use the computer or what everything is, and you've tried everything, make sure you reach out. We are happy to help you get started. So from here on out, all the videos are going to be done on a Bernina 790. So many of the Bernina embroidery machines are very, very similar. I'm going to be using functions that you'll find on actually any embroidery machine. So I hope you'll follow along and realize it doesn't matter which machine you have, you're going to be able to find the function, even if it's not in the exact spot it is on my machine, it will be there for you to locate. Your manual will then help you find where it is because now you know what it's actually called. And again, those first couple blocks are going to be kind of that practice time. And that's when you're really going to get good at your machine. I'm going to give you lots of tips, a lot of Bernina tips, a lot of questions that people ask me all the time that can help you along the way. Before I get into the specific supplies, fabric, and stabilizer that I want to teach you, how to pick out fabrics, how to pick out threads, couple things for getting your machine set up. First off, you need a solid surface table. That is one thing Bernina needs. It is a heavy machine and it is going to run fast. So you need a table that is not going to have any jiggle to it. If you've been wanting or wishing for a sewing cabinet, a piece of furniture that truly is going to work in your sewing studio, I highly recommend that you check what is available in your area out. Those tables are meant to secure the work surface and also make sure you don't have vibration while your embroidery machine is running. Next, what you plug your machine in is crucial. So if you're just plugging your machine into the wall, it's not my favorite choice. Here's what's going to happen. Sometimes electricity is not going to always flow as you should expect it to. And your machine and your embroidery will get a little confused. And that will have things like offset a little bit. So the answer is one step better than a surge protector, and that is a battery backup. Literally, you are plugged into a battery. So if your house or area has some fluctuations in power, your embroidery machine will not be affected. That will also save for any issues that could happen if you have some circuit boards go out. That's no fun. That's just power. So let's prevent all of that. So down underneath my table, I am plugged into a battery backup, and should I lose power at any time, the machine will continue to run. There's going to be times in the longer lessons like this one that your video is going to end. Make sure you scroll down because the next video will pick up right where the last one left off. For example, our next video, we're going to go into the specifics of fabric and thread selection so you get the best choices for all this work that you're about to start. We're ready to get into the actual supplies that you need for the Embroidery Essentials course. You're going to find a complete list in the student handout I've created for you. This is also where you're going to find the adjusted order for all the handouts, step-by-step instructions. And if you want, go ahead and print them off and put them in a binder, and then go ahead and adjust the order so you'll be ready to start with our lesson 1 with the first block we'll be doing. When it comes to fabric selection, you can do this with fat quarters. You might do as few as 4 fat quarters and maybe even as many as 8 different colors. Now do keep in mind that as you pick busier prints, some of the techniques may not show up. How would you know? Sometimes you just got to do the block. Think about how it's going to turn out. If it turns out, great. If it doesn't, you can always redo it. That's the beauty of these smaller techniques. You can get the little example of the technique without having to do this entire project from start to finish. I always think of it as being able to go to a buffet and this being able to try a little of each item, kind of like appetizers. So I just want to try a little bit. I don't need to do an entire huge project or a big quilt. This is going to give you that little taste, the understanding of both how the embroidery machine works and how to do that technique. So next time you sit down with a project from a new company, a new design collection, you're going to have an idea of how to go about and tackle the directions for the first time. Just like anything, first time, you can sometimes goof up. Now, if you find yourself just dying to get started, but you don't have your fabric yet, go ahead and do the first couple lessons on some practice fabric. That's going to get you comfortable with your machine, and that is going to allow you to get a better acquainted with maybe which fabrics or colors you might want to use. So don't get hung up on the actual colors. I've had many students just go ahead and plow through the lessons because once you get started, it's really hard to stop, and just use any fabric that you have in your collection. You don't have to share that the colors were nowhere close to coordinating. Just use it as that understanding and learning about your machine. Then you can always go back and redo the lessons as you see fit, maybe in the colors that you're looking for. Maybe have something that might be something fun to hang up on your own wall in your own sewing studio. So these are the colors that I plan on actually using in our course. So this reminded me of like summertime and popsicles. Don't ask me why, but this is what I decided to go with. So I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors, and this will definitely get started. So the first thing you want to do is select threads that actually match each of the fabrics. So I've got my green for the green one, I've got my white for the white, kind of a charcoaly gray. That's always great if you're not feeling like a black might work, and I'm honestly not sure how much of this black or dark charcoal fabric I'll be using, but I think I want it as some accents. If nothing else, I'm going to use this color as some of those highlights throughout the blocks and techniques. So I kind of have that watermelon color, the teal color, and the yellow. So the cool thing is that we're never going to use the yellow on the yellow. We're going to use the yellow like on the blue or on the red or on the dark. So this is going to get you started. Now let's do that one more time. I'm going to set these colors aside, but this will be the quilt that when we're done, that I'll have made in front of you from start to finish. So what if you just had 4 fat quarters in your collection, and again, you want to get started, but don't know where to start? Pull them out, again, whether these are your practice ones or your standard ones. So I've gone ahead and pulled out some colors that will actually match the fabrics that I have. So kind of one of each of those. There's another yellow and kind of that reddish color, which is great. This is kind of all in one family, but you're going to need something to make it pop. So if you don't have another fabric, now you're looking for other colors. Like this kind of plum purple is really going to stand out on those colors, and maybe even a little bit of a teal. So if you look at a color wheel, you might find yourself realizing maybe some opposites of the colors you've picked, and just go ahead and jump in from there. You can always add some fabrics later, and but use the threads to be kind of that extra pop. Now you're also going to need a background fabric. Now that's not the back of the quilt, but it's the background where a lot of the stitching will stitch on the block. Now that could be this yellow for right here, but you might need a little bit more than what you have as just a fat quarter. In your supply list, it's going to ask for a ½ a yard. So in my other one, I'm planning on using white as one of my background colors. Now what goes on the back of your quilt is actually totally up to you. So we'll play with that at the very end once you've stitched your blocks together and get ready to assemble it. But let's focus on just getting started, because that's usually why you're here, is you just want to get started right away. Let's talk about some of your thread quality choices. When you select thread, my favorite is actually polyester thread. And the reason why is that polyester is a stronger thread than rayon. These machines these days, especially the Berninas, run fast. And the faster the machine runs, the stronger the thread needs to be. It eliminates so many hassles. I'm going to give you other tips once we actually get stitching of what you can do to have trouble-free embroidery every time you sit down. But starting off with good quality thread can make a difference. Now, there are threads on the internet, packages of thread, and they say polyester, embroidery thread, but they are not always all the same. So if it seems like a great deal, sometimes it's not. So my 2 choices of thread is Isacord brand, that is a polyester thread. That's what I'll be using with this particular quilt. And the other one that we sell in our store is the Robertson Anton polyester thread. And again, those both have lots of colors to choose from. They have proven themselves over and over to be able to work with all the different brands of machines that we assist with in our store, and they are trouble-free to use. Now, here's something. If you're having trouble with a certain thread, you might choose another thread. Don't blame your machine just yet. Try a different brand of thread and see if that might be your issue. I'm going to give you one little tip, and you can see if this is something of some of those threads you might have. Is one problem is some thread that's inexpensive but still polyester stretches. So if it is kind of a stretchier thread, if you literally can stretch it like bubble gum, that might be a problem with the machine. Machine just doesn't know how to handle that well. The 2 brands, Isacord and Robertson Anton, or sometimes called RA, polyester thread, have proven their worth. Yes, they will be a little bit more expensive, but I don't have time to be pulling my hair out and being frustrated with my embroidery machine. Plus, the colors that you probably are starting to accumulate for your embroidery machine, you're going to love them for sewing. And I do all my machine quilting. Yes, back on the sewing machine side, quilting projects, I love using polyester embroidery thread. You can put it in your bobbin, you can put it in your needle, you can use free motion, you can use your Bernina stitch regulator if you have one, which is my favorite. But you will find that just because you're accumulating all these colors, that you can only use them for embroidery. That is not true. I tend to probably reach for embroidery thread all the time. Bobbin thread, same thing. You need to get good quality bobbin thread. This one from OESD is great bobbin thread. And yes, we will need a thread stand to put these bigger cones on. This one is from Superior Threads. You can get it on a big spool, which I recommend because it's always cheaper that way, or you can buy it on the smaller spools. There's still like 1,400 yards on this spool. These, of course, are big. If you have the Bernina with the jumbo bobbins, you're probably going to find that if you just go ahead and wind all your bobbin thread onto your bobbins, maybe just go ahead and buy a couple extra packs, fill them all up, fill up one of these great, I love these because, well, normally they don't fall out because they're nice and secure. There we go. But they are great because I can toss this in the drawer. My bobbins stay where they are. They don't come undone, and I could fill one whole ring just with bobbin thread. Yes, we will use on the majority of our blocks the white thread. We are going to need 2 extra bobbins, 2 or 3, I can't remember, that are empty because we will need to fill some bobbins for a couple techniques at the end that will need to match our needle thread. Don't do those just yet because we don't know which color you'll be using. There's lots of choices for needles these days, but we do want to pick up embroidery needles. Schmetz now has the embroidery chrome needles, and I am a fan of a size 90-14. We're going to be going through lots of layers, so I want a bigger needle. If you don't have the bigger needle, you can definitely start with a size 75-11, but if you do have any skip stitches or breaking of threads, that's where we are going to need that larger size. Now, at our store, we do work with Husqvarna Viking and Pfaff machines, and that company provides us with 100 packs of needles. And if you want to treat yourself, this is a very cost-efficient way to buy needles, is at 100 at a time versus 5 packs. So if you're ready to splurge, I highly recommend the needles from 100 pack. Your local Husqvarna Viking or Pfaff store can hook you up with one of these 100 packs. You don't need much for stabilizer. The one we're going to use for the quilt blocks, the majority of this course, is going to be the poly mesh, which is a no-show mesh. It almost looks like fabric, and it's considered a cutaway stabilizer. You're going to notice that it's super soft. We'll be hooping just one layer of this when we get started to embroider, and everything is going to be built on this foundation. Now, don't cut these up into pieces just yet. I've got a great tip to help you learn how to conserve stabilizer once we get started. Our standalone design, the little cute little bee, is going to require a tearaway stabilizer. You don't need very much. This is the only project in this course that needs tearaway. And if you have a lighter weight tearaway, that's okay. We might just add a couple layers to your hoop before we stitch out this particular technique. For our lace design, the cute little butterfly, and yes, this is where we're going to match our bobbin thread, so it's the same on the front as it is on the back. We are going to use a mixture of aqua mesh, a water-soluble stabilizer, and a badge master, kind of a thick wash away that's almost more like a film. And I'll be showing you why we're going to partner these two stabilizers together. Now, if you don't have both, and you just have one of these, I will show you how you can successfully do the lace designs with what you have. If you haven't already realized, there is a Bernina Big Book of Feet, which I highly, highly recommend. If you own a Bernina, you own accessories, but don't always know how to use them, there has recently been the addition of the Big Book of Embroidery. This is over 200 pages of embroidery information that is all related to Bernina embroidery machines. So next time you're at your Bernina store, have them show you this book. It is wonderful. There's been even a few things that I was like, oh yeah, I got to remember to include that in the Bernina course because we don't include it with other brands. So there's so many good information, and it is very complete. So there's some other embroidery techniques and accessories that you can add to your machine in the back of the book that really go in and explain how they're used and what they're used for. If you've been enjoying the quilt that's been behind me over here, this is from our Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course, which I hope you'll check out. And we actually do so many of the feet that are in this particular book. So yes, we know you have a Bernina embroidery machine, but we also know that you have a Bernina sewing machine. And there's so much that you can do with that machine with the Bernina accessories. So when you're done with this course, I hope you'll head over and check out the Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course. You're going to see me use a couple scissors throughout this course, and curved embroidery scissors are so key. If you haven't picked up some applique scissors, those are wonderful. If you are left-handed, make sure you get an left-handed applique scissors because they are hand-specific, so you can't just flip them over and go the other way. I don't think that's going to be helpful at all. These are the Kai embroidery scissors. We'll put links in the resources of my favorite scissors. They are super sharp at the end, and they have bigger holes than you might realize. So if your hands are bigger or you have bigger thumbs, this is a wonderful one. But don't feel like you can only have one set of embroidery scissors. I do highly recommend to my students that if you can just buy yourself like 5 different pairs of embroidery type scissors. There's some with like a double curve, there's some that you pinch and then the tips clip, so you're not actually putting your hands in the actual holes. You need to try and find which ones that you like the best. For me, these are my 2 go-to scissors. Now we have, there's going to be times where we're going to be taping some fabric in place. So I have the OESD tape that is easy to remove. It doesn't gum up my fabric. I can stitch through it and it doesn't gum up my needle, and yet it can hold everything in place as we're floating some of our fabrics just on top of our embroidery hoop. Now, if you have not mastered your needle threader, or if somehow it is not aligned, you might find yourself purchasing a handheld needle threader. This will assist you in pushing the thread through the needle and not having to sit there and try to hand thread it. So this is actually a wonderful item. Sometimes you can find them in with your serger. So if you have a serger and was ever wondering what this is, I'll show you in one of our future blocks how to use the hand needle threader. USB sticks need to be selected with either the Bernina USB stick from your Bernina retailer or a 1 gig stick. So we'll be loading our designs on a USB stick and then putting them into the machine for access. I will be showing you what it looks like if you put designs on with a Mac computer and also with a PC computer. For our zipper bag, you'll need at least a 7-inch zipper or longer. I'm always a fan of longer zippers, and an optional little piece of ribbon. It's just going to end up being inserted into the seam when we get started. So we'll be doing a zippered bag with a folded fabric technique as the back. So this is something fun, one of your last lessons. But after the first couple lessons, if you feel like you want to do this, feel free to jump forward after you've got a few of the techniques under your belt. To get ready to start stitching, let's make it a little easier by cutting some of your fat quarters into 7-inch blocks. Now, keep in mind, this is not a square we're actually going to hoop, so it's okay that it is not going to fit in your hoop, but what this does is we are going to need just small pieces, and instead of trying to handle a gigantic, large piece of fabric in and over our hoop, we can maneuver smaller pieces. So yes, there will be a little waste, but trust me, it is so much easier. We also are going to need some of that cotton batting cut up into 7-inch blocks as well. I am a fan of cotton batting, just that nice thin batting. If you've got some leftovers, let's see if we could use that for this particular project. I would avoid polyester batting. It tends to move around and squish, not to our liking, and I'll show you why cotton batting is so much nicer. Your fabric kind of wants to stick to it naturally, and as we're putting things in our hoop and layering them, that natural stick will be a great help. As we get ready to start our free motion quilt block, the first one of your lessons, I'll go ahead and show you things about your hoops and how to hoop the stabilizer for the most efficient use. Let's talk hoop sizes. So your standard hoop that comes with the Bernina is this particular oval hoop, and this will be perfect for the size of designs that we'll be stitching in the Embroidery Essentials course. Now we'll soon be seeing that there are actually two sizes of these designs that came and can be loaded on your USB stick. So if you were doing the smaller size, yes, your medium Bernina hoop would be an option. So as we go forward and you start to work with other projects, you will be guided that the best results will always be when your design fits in your hoop size. As you go forward into other projects, you will find that when you choose the hoop size closest to the design size, you're going to get the best results. So even though we have for this machine, the maxi hoop, or if you've got a larger machine, the jumbo hoop, you will find that yes, you can do the designs, but they're actually quite small. And yes, you could probably get two in a hoop. But there is a little extra play in the stabilizer when you use a hoop much bigger than the design size. So one thing nice about Bernina hoops is that they are oval. As you tighten them, every side, every part of the hoop gets nice and snug. And that's just the benefit of having a curved hoop versus a hoop with actual corners. So I am going to be using the oval hoop for this particular course, but if you were doing the smaller designs, you could use the medium hoop. And if you do want to save yourself some rehooping options, you can use the larger one. Except if you do see some variances in quality of your stitching, you might switch back to the oval hoop. If you're curious about what the two sizes look like, this is the one that most people will pick for the stitching. This is considered a 5-inch finished square, but there is also a size of a 4-inch designed size square for the blocks. So when you load all the designs, you are going to get both sizes. We're just going to know that the first design that comes up is the large one and the second design is the smaller one. And I'll show you how you can tell. Now on this particular one, you know what I did was I actually skipped all the techniques and I only stitched really the outlines of the design. So I didn't do the cut work. This is the cut work block. I didn't do the applique. I just sewed out the stitching. And the other thing that I did is I actually used Aurifil cotton thread. So a lot of you use that for piecing, and I love that for piecing. So this almost has like a duller finish. It doesn't have that sheen that embroidery thread normally has. And I just have always wanted to stitch something with cotton thread just to have a comparison. So I did the smaller size and then skipped the techniques. Now this was super fun because it actually went really fast because I skipped over so many steps and just stitched out the outlines. Next, let's talk about some hooping techniques. So this is the poly mesh. I just actually opened a new roll and I wanted to show you what I do with the label so I can keep it close by. I actually roll it with the printed side on the inside. Just roll it up, just nice and tight, and then slide it inside the roll. So here's why I do it inside out, and that's because I usually know approximately what color of the label I'm looking for. Cutaway does mean that it is a red label, so at a glance down through the middle here, I can go, oh yeah, that's my poly mesh, or that's my cutaway, or just easily pull it out and peek at what it is. So I've actually pulled off, instead of just cutting a piece that will go in our hoop size, I've actually pulled off a piece that is actually about 36 inches long. And I'm going to show you as we start how this could be a very efficient way of using stabilizer. So I'm actually going to hoop it so this part here will stick onto the outside of the machine. Wherever your bracket is, that's where the hoop is going to attach to the embroidery module. And because this particular stabilizer today was 15 inches wide, I was going to hoop it this way, but I don't think I'm going to have enough room to get actually 2 blocks out of this. It's not just the blocks, but we need a little bit extra for seam allowance, which you'll see after we do our second block. So I've decided that instead, I'm going to go ahead and hoop my stabilizer kind of from right to left. So my longer piece is going to be hanging out to the left side. And once we get 1 block done, you're going to see how efficient this is. So separate your hoops, loosen the screw a little bit, lay the stabilizer close to that cut edge over here. And without being real perfect, which is the beauty of the Anita Good Design collections, when we work with the quilt blocks, is that they can just really be hooped up on a piece of stabilizer, and then we'll be ready to stitch. I'm a little close here, so I am gonna, because I have plenty of extra, I'm gonna just go ahead and make sure I've got plenty of room above and below. So go ahead and tighten up the screw until you can't tighten it any further, and then if necessary, just kind of make sure that stabilizer has been nicely flattened inside the hoop. You'll get a nice little callus on your fingers as you work to get that nice and tight. And then sometimes I'll go one little extra step. You can hear right now, you can hear the hoops kind of scratching on the table. So I'm going to take my thumbs on the inside hoop and just push a little past flush here, and then be able to, you'll see that it's just a hair past that outer ring, and watch. Oh, listen, it's so much quieter. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and show you how to pull up the design and get ready to stitch. A couple final setup options for your Bernina. If you happen to have a machine that has a slide-on table that can be used in conjunction with the embroidery module, I want to first show you how to put it on. So if the embroidery module is already attached to the machine, that's the first part. Go ahead and set them together. Remember, make sure your table is nice and sturdy and doesn't have any bowing to it. If it does, then the connections of the two might not be the greatest. So just keep that in mind if you run into any of those issues. Take the slide-on table and slide it in. Now, just like it works when you're about ready to sew with it, you're going to slide it, but you're probably going to notice that it needs a little help. This is what I do. I take my whole forearm and just gently lift up on the inside of the machine, just enough that it can level it out and click onto place, but the embroidery module still stays connected. Just needs like a little lift, and it's perfectly in place. Next, I've put a embroidery needle size 90/14 in the machine. I have cleaned and oiled this machine, which is something I do before I sit down to embroider at any day. It is so important to keep these machines lubricated and cleaned. So if you haven't had your machine serviced in a while, it is truly best to keep this Bernina running in top condition is have your machine serviced annually, especially if you haven't used it. So let's say it sat for a year, maybe even 2 years. Have the machine serviced before you attempt all these stitching. The blocks are going to take a little time, and I don't want you frustrated, but having your machine kind of tuned up will really make this experience be a lot more enjoyable. If you think about taking a car that sat in your garage for a year or two on a road trip, you definitely wouldn't go anywhere without having a quick look at with your local mechanic, or even just get the oil changed. Now, once again, on a Bernina with the big bobbins, the jumbo hook machines, I recommend that you oil the machine each morning that you're about ready to stitch or embroider. Trust me, that will make a difference. And if you embroider a lot, like sometimes a lot of our students get on a roll, you might find if you get any hiccups, maybe later this evening, that you stop and do that once again. Just a little drop of oil. We have videos on how to oil your machine. You can definitely Google them and you'll find my tips and tricks, including for the larger bobbin machines. There's a little quick flip way to get the hook back in there that I'd love to show you. I will put that actually in this course so you can watch and realize how easy it is to take things apart and put them back together. Now, since we did just put this little table on, a lot of times what I'll do to be able to oil and clean is you can just push down on this button and then just lift this off and get down to your bobbin area. Now, if you're just changing bobbins, maybe you'll make a point to see if you can do it without taking the table off and kind of do it by look, because there is a little window here, look and feel, so you don't have to take that off every single time that you want to get down in your bobbin area. You do also notice that I have switched from the zigzag throat plate to the straight stitch throat plate. A lot of the Berninas these days come with this plate, and it is ideal when you're doing embroidery or free motion quilting or just sewing in the center needle position. Now, once I go ahead and get my design up on screen, I'll go ahead and tell the machine that I've put that plate on so I don't accidentally pick a zigzag next time I sit down to sew and forget that this is the plate that is on the machine. Next, I'm taking the USB stick and putting it into the side of the machine. Once you've done so, touch the USB symbol at the top. I've gone ahead and made a folder called Embroidery Essentials. You'll notice that I'll be touching the screen with my finger or sometimes with the stylus. Both of those will work. Now, we mentioned about your designs being in 2 sizes. That's why you're seeing pairs of each of these designs. So our first block that we're doing is the free motion block, and that is going to be page 16, and I've actually printed it double-sided. So I'm going to be showing you how to read the directions so it's super easy to understand. Now, most of the time we're going to be working with the directions that are going to be the steps that you'll be seeing on your machine. But behind that particular set of information are pictures. Now, the pictures, as I like to say, are like the cheat sheets. So if you don't know what it's meaning, you can flip to the pictures, peek at them, and then flip back. And the reason I say peek is because you don't want to live on the picture side, because some places it might have 3 pictures to show you what you're doing, but you're only stitching one part, one of the items off the list. So if you need to, and that's why they're numbered on the front, but lettered by the pictures. So there'll be times where I'll reference both of them, but like I said, if you'll just make sure you're always working off the front page. Here's where we're gonna find this size and name of the design, which will be helpful because some of the designs will look similar to others. So on this one, the fancy name is AFC FM1, and then at the end is the A. That's gonna be the larger size, and the same design by the same number, but with a B after it, will be the smaller size. So since A always comes before B, you'll see that right here on screen, you will get the results of the first one being the larger one and the second one being the smaller one. Now, if you don't want to be confused, you can easily remove all the B designs from your USB stick and then only be left with the larger size. Totally up to you. But I am looking for this free motion block, kind of a B with a little trail here. So as I go, here it is right here. I've touched my arrow to the side and I can find that design. So go ahead and touch it and bring it up on screen. Just on a side note, if you are a Mac user and you copy the designs to your USB stick on a Mac computer, you will find that the Embroidery Essentials folder will have these squiggly diagonal lines in it. There's nothing wrong with your machine, and there's nothing wrong with the USB stick or the designs, but there happens to be an extra file that is showing up. You're going to notice that as I arrow all the way to the halfway point, I get to the designs that we just saw. And the difference is there's a dot underscore on these designs here that don't work. And then here would be the designs that we would use. So just to prove that we would be able to use them, I'm going to go ahead and select this design, and we're right where we need to start. Let me show you a trick for threading. Number one, you're going to see me use a thread stand. So this is a single spool holder. Great if you're using larger cones like that bobbin thread. This will sit directly kind of behind your machine or on the side of your machine. And Bernina also has a multi-spool holder that can also fit on the back side of the machine, but keep in mind you're still only using one spool at a time. Now, why do I like a thread stand? So number one, I seem to always lose or flip on the ground the little spool cap that fits perfectly in the ends of the embroidery threads. So instead of me always having to keep my fingers on this cap, see what I mean? I will often use a thread stand. So I can take the spool cap and not be on the floor looking for it. The other benefit of having a thread stand is the thread has a little time to relax. So I'm going to just set it here so you can see it. It's going to come all the way up to the thread stand, and then you're going to bring it over to your first guide. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to thread with two hands. Come up from the back side towards you, and with your left hand, bring that down the front part of your machine. Now, right down through this first groove is where the tension is. And your thread needs to really make sure it gets in the tension discs. So if you ever have where the threads are all balled up on the back side, it's because the thread hasn't gotten seated in that top tension. And here's a way to make sure it gets down all the way, is just give your thread a little floss. Now I haven't gone through the take-up lever just yet, so I've just come down but come up and then floss, floss, and then I'm holding, and that almost gives the machine a little, or the thread a little bit of resistance, helping you get into each of the guides. Now, again, if you have not mastered your needle threader, this would totally be the time to make sure you have everything working. It is so much easier. You can practically do it with your eyes closed. I've also put on the regular foot number 26 embroidery foot. Has a little kind of teardrop on it, and I don't have to put my thread down that little hole. You'll just see me laying it over the top of my foot. Ever since I started to work with an embroidery machine, I have loved freestanding lace designs. So in this lesson, we're going to be talking about how to do the lace butterfly. And yes, it is just thread that we need. But over the years, I have come to learn more about the wash-away stabilizer that we can use for the best results. So couple things. So I have for you right here a kind of droopy pumpkin. Now this particular design actually does have fabric along with the lace parts that button together. This is actually from an Oklahoma embroidery design, or OESD. And what happened is using stabilizer that was not stiff enough once it washed through the design. Now you can wash stabilizer all completely away from the threads, and you are left with the softest pieces. I've even made a beautiful tablecloth, and it's just soft and drapey. Now, things like these, we don't want them to be drapey. We want them to have a little bit of body. We want to, maybe when we stick them to where they're going to be, we want them to hold their shape. So this is not what we're looking for. So what we're talking about is water-soluble stabilizer is all we're using in the hoop. And on your supply list, that's what it said, kind of a water-soluble stabilizer. But I'm going to give you a new little hint that we've been using in our store over the last couple years so we don't get the droopy pumpkin look. So we are talking about stabilizer such as one layer of Badge Master, or something that is a very thick wash-away film, partnered with one layer of a water-soluble mesh. So this one actually is going to look like the fabric or no-show mesh that you've been using so far, but it is a wash-away version. That's why the label is blue with this particular brand. The Badge Master is like your water-soluble stabilizer that you might use on top of a t-shirt or something with nap, like on the top of towels. But this is a super, super thick version of it. I almost think of it as 3 times as thick. as that single layer that you would put on the top of fabric with nap that you don't want kind of poking through. But here's the trick. When you match the two of them together, one layer of each, and then you wash out your lace design at the end, it will have body. It will actually have the stiffness that we need. So why not just use the clear version? Well, here's another little bit. As soon as your needle starts to puncture through water-soluble stabilizer that's just kind of that film that you can see through, there's a point where sometimes there's so many stitches that it'll actually puncture through and start to separate the design that it's being stitched from the hoop stabilizer. Well, that doesn't work out well because now they're going to start to pull away and then it won't finish where it's supposed to finish. But if you partner this with a piece of the more fabric-like stabilizer, the two will work together. Now, it's actually the one that's the clear, heavy version is what's going to give your design the stiffness. So this is great. So if you just use the water-soluble mesh version, it's going to wash out and it's very soft and drapey like the pumpkin. But like I said, when you put the two together, this gives it the guarantee that it stitches out perfectly while it's all in the hoop. So both are doing their jobs and we're getting the best of both the stabilizers in one design. So I'm going to go ahead and hoop up in my medium hoop. I'm going to pick the smaller lace design to start off with. You have two sizes and you'll find that your larger one will need to go in your Bernina oval hoop, but if you want to do the smaller one, it will fit in the medium hoop. You also are going to need two bobbins. You're going to need a thread that is for the majority of the butterfly wings, and if you would like a different color for the butterfly body, you're going to need to wind a bobbin of each of those colors. And that's so when you see it from the front and the back, it looks harmonious. So you don't see like just white bobbin thread showing through, and you would. And that's probably not the look that you're going through for unless you're stitching out a white butterfly. So I'm going to go ahead, get my bobbins ready, and hoop up a layer of each of these stabilizers.